Hi, this is Paul, and I finished chapter 2 in Peterson's book last night, so here are some thoughts. Rule 2 is treat yourself like someone you are responsible for helping. I This was an interesting chapter. A lot of it had some of the Adam and Eve stuff from the biblical series in it. A lot of it had some of Peterson's, what on Jesus Creed was called Calvinist anthropology, and so I can agree with that. And as a pastor, I had a few thoughts about it, and let's just jump in. As a pastor, people take terrible care of themselves. I have a lot of older people in my church, and the oldest member of my church every Sunday brings donuts for the crowd, and I watch the diabetics line up and eat the donuts every week, and they do. Weight is a constant issue for so many Americans, as Peterson points out in one of the videos he did recently, or the Joe Rogan one he did yesterday. While medical issues take them out, their decisions or avoidance nearly always hastens the end. One thing I've noticed as a pastor is that people, just like Peterson says in this chapter, they don't take their pills. And so often they don't seek treatment. They don't take care of themselves. And most of the reason they don't take care of themselves is because they're avoiding it. And the reason they're avoiding it is I think, partly because they're avoiding they just want to avoid. This is how we, as I think Americans, this isn't unique to Americans, obviously. I think this is human. But as Americans, our dominant focus, our dominant method of addressing suffering is distraction in this country. And I think that's obvious by television, movies, music, strategy, shopping, drinking, porn, video game playing. Our dominant mode of dealing with suffering as Americans is distraction. And we have an entire entertainment and commercial economy based on that. If you are suffering, if you are feeling any angst, if you are feeling any need, shop, take a vacation, watch TV, do porn, find a relationship. Everything is a tool to avoid suffering. And so when it comes to legitimate medical suffering, and again, I've got a lot of older members in my church, and when you get later on in years and your body isn't working like it's supposed to, well, what do you do with it? And so often I see that it is not the medical issue that really takes people out. It's all of the character and lifestyle choices issues. And these issues have so often been hard baked into people in their 30s, 40s, 50s, and 60s. So by the time they hit their 70s or 80s, their bodies are shot. They're shot by poor eating. They're shot by alcohol. They're shot by inactivity, and we all know this. And you can't watch the evening news and having the news scream at you that go to the gym, eat right, see your doctor, and people don't do it. Well, why don't we do it? I think Peterson kind of half answers that question here. Most prayer requests are about the human element, habits or decisions, not the physical malady, and mental health is ignored and avoided. I've mentioned in some of my previous videos, as with my father's ministry, where my church is located in town has a high population of homeless people living in group homes. This is one guy. I'm sure he's dead by now. He used to sleep on the church lot under a pomegranate bush a number of years ago. His name was Larry, and he had family that lived in the neighborhood. And many of the homeless that I know still have family around, but they've destroyed their relationship with their family. And Larry was an alcoholic. Larry, you can see on his hands, he painted for a living, and so he painted for a guy who had some cheap apartments, and so he'd hire Larry. He'd pay him cash under the table. Larry would get enough money so that he would buy beer. Larry would rather spend his money on beer and sleep outside. If it got really cold, maybe he'd use some of his money to stay in a hotel room, or sometimes his boss would let him sleep in the apartment that he was painting. But this is how Larry had his life. And one day he sits. This is where folks, they knock on my door. My door's to the outside. They come in and they sit. And a lot of these people, all they need to do is talk. They don't want me telling them they shouldn't drink. They already know that. Just like everybody in church knows they should take care of themselves, and they don't. But Larry one day comes down and he sets a beer can on my desk and says, "My life is in this can." And I thought, wow, this guy, what words do I have to say to this man that would illuminate and somehow break the spell? We'd all like to imagine in the second Lord of the Rings movie that we can be Gandalf and we can walk up to King Theoden and break Saruman's spell on him. But I'll tell you, as a pastor, I don't got that power. I sit there and I watch Larry or my friend Daniel. I watch them destroy their lives. And, Daniel would say to me again and again, "Don't try to save me. Don't try to save me." Yet, he would also at the same time knock on my door and beg me to give him money, or sometimes I'd take him to the hospital. And one day he says, why is it always you driving me to the hospital? Why am I never driving you to the hospital? I said, well, let's see. You're an untreated alcoholic and multiple drug user. You've got untreated mental illness. You eat out of the dumpster of the supermarket next door. You're abusing your body constantly. You don't have a car. You don't have a legitimate place to live. So it's a mystery to you why it's always me driving you to the hospital and not the other way around. It's not a mystery to anyone else on this earth. And this is exactly the human condition. Now again, Peterson on the human condition, I was going to pull up this video, but I didn't. But, he talks about the fact that we're mysteries to ourselves. And you hear this in the Apostle Paul in Romans 7, the good that I would do, I don't do. Ask anybody in my church, should you ask any diabetic in my church, should you eat that donut? They'll say no. And again, the difference so often health-wise between the diabetics who are doing well and the diabetics who are doing poorly is the diabetics who are doing well are not eating the donut. It's that simple. It's that obvious. Yet the diabetics that aren't doing well are eating the donuts. So what's with us? And this isn't just diabetics who are in their 70s and 80s. Like I said before, all of these problems started in our 30s, 40s, and 50s. And we avoided the doctor. And I do the same thing. See a dentist, see a doctor, take care of your stuff, file your taxes on time, save your money. We all know this stuff and we all don't do it. And so, and then Jonathan Haidt gets into this in terms of the rider and the elephant. And again, part of what I've appreciated about Peterson is his realistic view of the human condition. We're blind to ourselves. Others see us more objectively, which is why we pay doctors and lawyers to take care of us, because the doctor who has himself for a doctor has a fool for a doctor, and the lawyer who has himself for a lawyer has a fool for a lawyer. Now, all this admonition, and so Peterson's book is some people are saying, well, it's a self-help book, and there's an element to that in the book, but all this admonition is necessary but insufficient. And as a pastor, I know this well. Often people will, if they're frustrated with, say, someone else in the church or someone else in their family, they'll say, "Pastor, you should go talk to them." And I say, "Okay, I'll go talk to them. But what are your expectations of me talking to them? Do you really think that if I tell all the diabetics, 'Hey, don't eat the donuts,' that they won't?" No, people don't work this way. And even in Jesus, in the parable of Lazarus and the rich man, Lazarus in suffering in Hades calls up to, the rich man suffering in Hades calls up to Lazarus in the bosom of Abraham and says to Abraham, "Send him back to earth so he'll warn my family." And Abraham says, "Well, he's got Moses and the prophets. If he's not going to listen to them, he's not going to listen to a man rising from the dead," which, of course, given the entire Christian story, makes sense. So this is the human condition. And Peterson is a father figure, but I'll tell you, this daddy doesn't live with you. And if you're like me, you'll be listening to Peterson for a while. You found him, but who knows how long, and there'll be someone else you're listening to. And again, it's back to the Truman Show. Everybody's riveted to the Truman Show. Truman walks off stage and everybody turns the channel and goes to something else. Distraction in America is the chief way we deal with suffering. Look at all the unused gym memberships. So I joined a gym, and really probably the only way that I'm managing to follow through on this is because my son joined the gym and my wife joined the gym, and my son, who really struggled over the last couple of years with discipline when he's in college, he's really learned some discipline. So he's always like, gym day, and it's like, I don't want to go to the gym. I really don't want to go to the gym. But because my son is saying gym day, just that little bit, I go to the gym. And so, Peterson gets into this with his self-authoring program. Now, while some of the advice you get is wrong, much of it is helpful, often obvious, but the gap is in following through. And I think, again, here, YouTube is a great delivery system, but here's the irony of YouTube. Name whatever guru you have. It might be Sam Harris or Christopher Hitchens or Jordan Peterson, or it might be an online preacher like Tim Keller or William Lane Craig, or it might be a New Age person, and your YouTube gurus. It might be Paul Vanderklay. Your YouTube gurus come and go, but YouTube, the platform, endures through it all, and that's why they have their list of things. They don't really care who you listen to. They just want you to keep coming to YouTube, and they want you to keep coming to the ads. And so one of the interesting things in reading that book, 1493, was that how many of the products that shaped the exploration and exploitation of the New World were basically addiction driven. Tobacco, sugar, and now in America, again, our chief way to address suffering in America, and I don't just mean big suffering, I mean the slow burning angst, nihilism, is distraction. And that is exactly what Google is dishing up for us on YouTube. That's why they've got all the things to the side. You done with Vanderklay? Okay, click on Peterson. You done with Peterson? Okay, click on Keller. You done with Keller? Okay, click on Hitchens. You done with them? Okay, look at some cats. On and on and on and on. And Google just wants to keep you tied there. Read Screwtape Letters. C.S. Lewis makes the point that what the devils really want to do with people is just keep them mindless their whole life. One of the, another really cool blog that I read, not a Christian blog, is Slate Star Codex. It's a very popular blog. Scott Alexander is the guy who does it, and he also is a psychologist. And he describes, he has this great post from a few years ago. I'll put the link in the comments. He describes where he works. I work in a wealthy, mostly white college town, consistently ranked amongst one of the best places to live in this country. If there's anywhere that you might dare hope wasn't filled to the brim with people living hopeless lives, it would be here. But that hope is not realized. Every day I get to listen to people describe their problems that would seem overwrought if they were in a novel and made up if they were a think piece on the fragmentation of American society. A perfectly average patient will be a 70-year-old woman who used to live somewhere else, but who moved a few years ago after her husband died in order to be close to family. She has some medical condition or another and that prevents her from driving or walking around much, and the family she wants to be close to have their own issues. So she has no friends within 500 miles and never leaves her house except to go to the doctor's appointments. She has one son who is in jail, one daughter who married a drug addict. She also has a grandchild, her only remaining joy in the world, but her drug addict son-in-law uses access to him as bargaining chip to make her give him money for her rapidly dwindling retirement account so he can buy drugs. When she can't cough up quickly enough, he bans her from visiting or talking to the grandchildren. Plus, he tells the grandchild it's her fault. Her retirement savings are rapidly running out, and she has no idea what she will do when they're gone. Probably end up on the street. Also, her dog just died. Yes, And he's writing again from a community that everyone says, well, this is a good neighborhood, and everybody here has money, and people have retirement accounts, and people have Social Security, and they're driving good homes and living in nice cars. And I work in a community that is none of those things. And so I read this and say, absolutely. Sometimes I listen to my friends who are into community development, and I just want to say, you show me a developed community, because I'll take you to the wealthiest, most affluent community in Sacramento, and I'll open any door of the homes, and I'll scratch a little bit, and I'll find a sea of misery. Why am I a Calvinist? Because I have eyes and I look around. And so I work in a neighborhood that, quite frankly, at least when we get to characters like these, people are like, oh yeah, I get that. And I find that people are amazingly fascinated with the lives of the homeless. Why? Because deep down inside, they know they are one bad decision away from it. And that is true if they drive an Audi or a Lexus, or they buy all of their clothes at Nordstrom's. It's just true. So how bad things are? Yeah, things are bad. And so what Scott Alexander runs through is this little thing just based on averages. 1% of people are in prison, 2% on probation, 1% in nursing homes, 2% have dementia, 20% of people have chronic pain. That's true. People in my congregation, I talk to them all the time. They fell or they hurt or something like that, and then they get on opioids and prescribed by their doctor, and off we go into the opioid thing. Read Dreamland by Quinones. 7% of people have depression in any given year. 2% are chronically disabled. 1% are schizophrenic. 20% are on food stamps. 1% are wheelchair bound. 7% are alcoholic. And those are only the people who are being significantly disabled by alcohol. Those aren't the people for whom alcohol is a crutch that helps them go to sleep at night. And it's a crutch for when anxiety is creeping up on them, and they're self-medicating for all kinds of things with alcohol. It's no wonder that Peterson's philosophy is shaped because he used to work with alcoholics. And I just started chapter 3, and he's talking about life in northern Alberta. So chronic heroin users, unemployed, disability, domestic violence, sexually abused as children. 9% of people, male and female, have been raped during their lifetime. This is life on planet Earth. And again, you wonder why I'm a Calvinist? And so then he runs through the numbers. So he has this script, and he says that of every 20 people, you've got chronic pain, you've got alcoholism, you've got unemployment. And remember, this doesn't count all the problems that don't fall easily into any quantified category, like everyone hates them because they're really ugly and annoying. And it doesn't count things that I couldn't find good statistics on, like had a child die recently, or doesn't count things that it would have gotten into trouble for, including autism or single mother. It doesn't count a lot of things. It doesn't count children of divorce. What is that, 40, 50%? And we all know what that does to a child, how it drives a truck through their emotional world. And so basically, I, as a pastor, and I sit down with people, and we get to know each other, and we talk, and I just wait for it, because at some point we're going to get to the place of their pain in their life, and they're going to put it on the table for me. Why are they going to put it on the table for me? Because they're crying out to tell someone. And for me as a pastor, I'm one of the few safe people they can tell. I lose my job if I start coughing up secrets, like a therapist. Only often you come and see a pastor because you don't have the $150 to plunk down and talk to a therapist. And your medical coverage won't pay for therapy every week, or, and this is the world. It really is. And this is the world, this blows my mind, because this is the world in the most stable, the most affluent, the most privileged, the most wonderful place to live, probably in all of human history. I know that because I worked in the Dominican Republic with people who had almost nothing. And here's the irony. I don't find Americans all that happier. In some ways they are, and in some ways the miseries of living as a desperately poor illegal Haitian in the Dominican Republic is more miserable and unstable, but less though than you might imagine. Again, read Jonathan Haidt on this. And so Peterson gets at that in this. He says, why don't we take care of ourselves? Because deep down inside, why should you take care of anything as ugly naked, ashamed, frightened, worthless, cowardly, resentful, defensive, accusatory, as a descendant of Adam. Even if that thing, that being is himself. I do not mean at all to exclude women with this phrasing, because they're in the same boat. All the reasons we have discussed so far for taking a dim view of humanity are applicable to others as much as to the self. They're generalizations about human nature, nothing more specific. But you know so much more about yourself. You're bad enough as other people know you. You're bad enough as other people know you, but only you know the full range of your secret transgressions, insufficiencies, and inadequacies. No one is more familiar than you with all the ways your body and mind are flawed. No one has more reason to hold in contempt, to see you as pathetic, and by withholding something that might do you good, you can punish yourself for all of your feelings. A dog, a harmless, innocent, unself-conscious dog, is clearly more deserving. And if you catch Scott Alexander's post, and their dog died. I remember one person saying to me, I was meeting with him, and he's well in years, and my wife passed a few years ago, but what really killed me was when my dog died. I have lots of friends who say, people hate people, but boy, do I love dogs, because when you come through the door at the end of the day, that dog is so happy to see you, and it doesn't matter what kind of jerk you've been all day long, and the jerk you've been, where you said, someone came in the room and you said, can I help you? And inside your mind you thought, I'm going to scream if I have to help another person. And then someone, the people who have the highest stress at work are the ones who have to be duplicitous. The ones who are working a call center where they're sitting there, hello, and the person on the other end is screaming at them. Again, with Daniel used to call the bank that meant that his Social Security would come through, and that's where I learned that call center people, they can deal with 3 obscenities and then they have the right to hang up. And Daniel would burn through those 3 obscenities usually in the first 3 minutes because he was frustrated because this is humanity. What does it mean to know yourself naked, or potentially worse, to know yourself and your partner naked? If you can't identify that sentiment, you're just not thinking. Beauty shames the ugly, strength shames the weak, death shames the living, and the ideal shames us all. People say to me they have a hard time understanding hell. I don't have a hard time understanding hell at all. People say they have a hard time understanding Judgment Day. I don't have a hard time understanding Judgment Day at all. Think for a moment about a being. If there is a God, this God is more brilliant, more intelligent, more beautiful than anything and everything you have ever seen on the planet. If you read the Bible, every time an angel shows up, everybody loses their stuff. They fall flat on the floor, and everything they can say is, I just don't want to exist anymore. I wrote a piece on my blog, I'll put the link in, about hell and parties, and I think Dallas Willard once was asked, who gets to go to heaven? And Dallas Willard answered, anyone who can stand it. Well, what does that mean? It means that if you can imagine the kind of being who would make this universe, the kind of being who would be the source of all glory, the kind of being who could make all of this in its intricacy, or okay, you're a Darwinian, the kind of being who could think through the kinds of mechanisms and set up the kind of universe where all of this would happen. We get in the face of such being and we see ourselves and we're undone. Read C.S. Lewis's Till We Have Faces, probably his best work of fiction. Yeah, I don't have a hard time understanding Judgment Day. I don't have a hard time understanding Revelation 6 when the great and the small, the kings and the slaves of the earth cry out to the mountains, fall on us, who can save us from the sight of the one who is on the throne and from the Lamb? Because when we see him, we will see ourselves as who we really are, and we won't need God to read through a list, and there'll be no, you did this, no, I won't. You ever have a fight with someone? You ever have a fight with your parents, or worse yet, a fight with your spouse, and it's all, you're the bad guy, I'm the good guy, I'm the victim. You ever have a fight like that? Well, here's the thing. When you see God, there will be no fight. Because when you see someone that beautiful, that pure, that right, that good, we will see ourselves as utterly detestable, and we will beg to go to hell. That is our condition. C.S. Lewis's Great Divorce. There's a bus, leaves hell, goes to heaven, and almost everyone else wants back on the bus. They want to get back to hell. They would rather die quietly and hopefully evaporate in the darkness than live in the light. Yet Peterson starts out with a good creation. In Genesis 1, God creates the world with a divine, truthful word, generating habitable, paradisal order from the pre-cosmogonic chaos. He then creates man and woman in his image, imbuing them with the capacity to do the same, to create order from chaos, and continues his work. You know, when I read that sentence, I thought, except for the divine spark, which theologically we would prefer, say, image of God. Divine spark is language that comes out of the Quaker movement, but I won't quibble too much with language. But this could be a Calvinist preacher. Creation, fall, redemption, restoration. This is the Calvinist, especially the Dutch Reformed, 4-step movement: creation, fall, redemption, restoration. And here Peterson starts out with a good creation and says, God made the world good. And then he goes on to, God, as God himself claims, so go the story. Vengeance is mine, I will repay, saith the Lord. According to this philosophy, you do not simply belong to yourself. But metaphorically speaking, there is also this. You have a divine spark in you. Again, I'd say you have the image of God in you, which belongs to you, which belongs not to you, but to God. We are, after all, according to Genesis, made in his image. We have the semi-divine capacity for consciousness. Our consciousness anticipates in the speaking forth of being. We are low resolution, kenotic. You know, this is, I won't get into that right now. Versions of God. We are made, we can make order from chaos and vice versa in our way with our words, so we may not exactly be God, but we're not exactly nothing either. Alvin Plantinga's brother, Neil Plantinga, was my teacher at Calvin Seminary, and if you want to read some good books, read anything from Neil Plantinga, because the guy is a master author, and his lectures in systematic theology, you wouldn't want to miss a class, you wouldn't want to miss a moment. What a gift with words. But Neil Plantinga says it this way. He says we are fallen royalty. That is what human beings are. And with this image of fallen royalty, you get a glimpse of both the potential and the power, but also the catastrophe of the fall. And C.S. Lewis says it this way. He says, anytime you look at a human being, you're looking at someone who may either one day become a creature that will be so godlike, at this moment you would be tempted to bow and worship them, or they may become a creature that would be so ghastly that you would think them a demon from hell. And in fact, I think we know this and we see this in life, because when people get older, when they become more and more themselves as they go through time, they either become beautiful saints or horrible, bitter, terrible sinners. And one of C.S. Lewis's arguments is that, you know, the thing about us is that we're new. I mean, 70, 80, 90 years is not enough differentiation. And Peterson makes the same point. The reason young people are always looking at it themselves, and everyone in high school is being unique, all in the same way. Well, the reason they're like that is just they're young. They haven't differentiated. And so then you start to work with people who are in their 60s, 70s, and 80s. That's why they don't go see the doctor. They're a world of bad habits. That's exactly who they are. And so what struck me, again, reading Peterson's, when I read this in his chapter, I thought, my goodness, not only has the man hit the first point of Reformed theology, he's also hit the first question and answer of the Heidelberg Catechism, which is one of the doctrinal statements of the Christian Reformed Church. What is your only comfort in life and in death? that I am not my own, but that I, body and soul, in life and in death, am not my own, but belong to my faithful Savior Jesus Christ, who has fully paid for all my sins with his precious blood, and redeemed me from the tyranny of the devil. And so he preserves me by the will of my Father in heaven, that not a hair can fall from my head. Yea, all things must work together for my salvation. Therefore, by his Holy Spirit, he also assures me of eternal life and makes me wholeheartedly willing and ready from now on to live for him. And chances are, if you know someone in the Christian Reformed Church and you visit their home, you may well find a copy of an embroidery or some plaque of the first question and answer of the Heidelberg Catechism hanging on their wall. Because for many of us, this is right up there with Psalm 23 in terms of things I turn to. Well, what can I do with this, with my crazy life? And worse, it's easier to blame everybody, which is why we do it. But when you actually get to the point of having enough strength to realize that I am the source of my misery, well, what is my only comfort in life and in death? That I am not my own. This is why I must take care of my body. This is why I should take the pills and not just give them to my dog. Read Peterson's opening to the chapter. And so one of the things that strikes me is, here's the crazy thing. So if there's anything our culture is a self-congratulatory culture. We imagine we are the pick of the litter, the pride of the world, and we think this because we have, cell phones that are amazing, and we have technology, and we have wealth, and so we look back in the past and we think, oh, all those silly, stupid, immoral people who owned slaves and killed the whales and did all these bad things. Surely if I was back then, sociology of knowledge applies to everybody else but you? No. If you were back then, you would have owned slaves and killed the whales, or been slaves, or been a serf, because just about everybody was a serf or a slave. And as a point, as an article that Peterson tweeted this week, we're all living like Rockefellers today. But does that make us any morally better? Remember what I said at the beginning of the video. American strategy for suffering is distraction. And what that means is that, well, and I'm going to get into that in a minute with Peter Kreeft. We are wimpy, characterless people. And we are this way partly because of the environment we have created to avoid the issues. We have built this nation on avoiding our character problems. And so, we don't want to deal with it. And so one of the things that strikes me often is how well the world in the past dealt with this. This is some old church somewhere that's decaying and falling into this use. But here's the thing, and we see this all the time. We have this big discussion about immigration and, should we let people in or not in? But one of the things that you routinely find is that people coming from undeveloped places in the world come to America, and what? They're humble. They work in the fields. It doesn't mean they don't have problems. They deal with alcohol. They deal with, all the distractions that we have here. But for example, there's a Tongan church that worships in our sanctuary on Sunday afternoons. And so the pastor there, speaks with a Tongan accent and was raised there, but now his children are here. But every year he takes his children back there because, now you stay with your grandma in that hut and you wake up in the morning and you pluck that fruit off the tree. And, Americans, they think, oh, that sounds so idyllic. Yeah, it sounds idyllic until you realize you don't have your nice toilet and shower. And, when the storm comes, you huddle for warmth. And, I was a missionary in the Dominican Republic. I know what it means to live in the Caribbean. I know what the Caribbean looks like, and I don't mean the resorts. Well, what's going on? Why can these immigrants come to this country and they actually have a work ethic and they actually have their life together? And you would say, well, they didn't have therapists. Well, and this is part of the big point of Peterson, was that in the ancient world, still filled with its problems, still filled with its immoralities, still filled with its tragedies, they somehow managed to keep their stuff together and to actually survive into this world. How? Well, They did it with religion. Well, what do you mean they did it with religion? And did that religion have problems? Yes, but it worked. Well, why did it work? Well, it worked because it knew some things. It knew some things that we're frankly distracting ourselves to avoid. Remember the title of this book that I bring up in almost every video? Amusing Ourselves to Death. This could be a subtitle for the strategy of screw tape in C.S. Lewis's Screw Tape Letters. Now, I want to play for you a little bit of a talk. Now, this talk was given by Peter Kreeft. Peter Kreeft grew up in northern New Jersey, where I did. He grew up in the Reformed Church of America, which is actually the church that the Christian Reformed Church split off of in the middle of the 19th century. He went to Eastern Christian High School, same high school I went to. He went to Calvin College, same college I went to, and he was a very bright young man. And the Christian Reformed Church, that's very proud of its philosophers like Alvin Plantinga and his brother Neil and Nicholas Walterstorff, and George Marsden and Richard Mouw. This Christian Reformed Church is very proud of its intellectuals. And the Christian Reformed Church was really hoping that Peter Kreeft would be the next big philosopher intellectual that Calvin College would put out and would be a member of the Christian Reformed Church. And Peter Kreeft went and joined the Roman Catholic Church. And so he's, some people in the Christian Reformed Church also hate him because he's a political conservative. But, this is my lesson for people. If you don't take offense, you can learn a lot. You can learn a lot from liberals. You can learn a lot from conservatives. You can learn a lot from a lot of people if you don't easily take offense. So Peter Kreeft went on, and part of what Peter Kreeft has written a lot of popular books about philosophy and Socrates. This is a recording from an event that Eric Metaxas, who now does a radio show and blog, Eric Metaxas did called Socrates in the City. And if you listen to the whole thing, I don't know if the whole thing, I found a version on YouTube, but you can find it on MP3. You can find it in written form. Just Google Peter Kreeft, The Dark Side. It's all over the internet. It's a wonderful lecture. I'll just play the beginning of it, but you'll notice, if you're used to listening to things, another guy that I've listened to over the years is N.T. Wright. N.T. Wright is in the audience, and he asks a question of Peter Kreeft. So the thing is wonderful. But this is, now part of my goal with this is to hook all you YouTubers up with some really good people. And Peter Kreeft is another good person to listen to. And if you like, once you listen to this, you'll get a sense of that. Jordan Peterson's stuff is not unique, and that folks have been saying similar kinds of things for a long time. So let's play a little bit of Peter Kreeft's talk.
But by doing it.
Before we begin, Dr. Kreeft will speak for about 40 minutes, after which we will have about 35 or so minutes for...
That's Metaxas, and he's a comedian, and wait for this.
Q&A. We always have a problem with the Q&A because a lot of people don't really understand what a question is. It's always easy to get...
And you hear this in the Peterson things too. A lot of people don't really understand what a question is. This is an opportunity for me to give a speech. Well, hey, get a YouTube account. You can give all the speeches you want.
A question confused with pontificating ad nauseum. I can see how you'd make that mistake. A lot of people never get in front of a microphone and stuff just happens. But we want to keep that kind of magic to a minimum tonight. So thank you in advance for hearing what I'm saying. But of course, there's someone here who's paying no attention, and we'll know who that is in about 40 minutes. After we stop at 8:30, there's plenty more reception, more hors d'oeuvres, more wine. But now, of course, it's my very great pleasure to introduce Dr. Peter Kreeft.
Well, from somebody who has not suffered very much, you're supposed to receive some wisdom about suffering. That's an irony. All right, let's just plunge in. There's three kinds of evil that I want to talk about: suffering, death, and sin. What we fear most of the time is suffering, then death, then sin. Exactly the opposite of what it should be. But that's all right. I'll start with the problem of suffering. To live is to suffer. That was Buddha's first noble truth. The truth that he thought was the most obvious and indisputable truth in life.
And again, this is Peterson. Suffering is something that you can't deny.
Data on which any quasi-scientific theory of human life must be erected.
And again, this is Peterson.
Pain is the most obvious problem in the world. This is no less true today, for now that our civilization has succeeded in conquering half of humanity's physical pains by anesthetics and medical technology and boogie boards, it has also doubled humanity's spiritual pains: depression, despair, divorce, which is more painful than death, other betrayals, loneliness, emptiness, meaninglessness, the existential vacuum.
Did you catch that? We've succeeded at eliminating the physical pains. Isn't this opioid addiction? Isn't this alcoholism? And we multiply the existential pains.
Viktor Frankl says, quoting Nietzsche, "A man can endure almost any how if only he has a why."
This quote is also found in the second chapter in Peterson's book.
The how is the circumstances, including the suffering. The why is a purpose and a meaning. This is not a theory, this is an observation. Frankl is a scientist. He observed this to be true in the laboratory of Auschwitz. The corollary of this truth is that if we do not have a purpose and a meaning, then we cannot endure any suffering that's inconvenient.
And again, also notice the centrality of meaning. Again, Peterson.
Our culture seems to have made the Faustian bargain of giving up a better why for a better how, giving up meaning for comfort. We've conquered the world of pain, but we've lost our soul, our meaning, our hope, our purpose. And that's why the physical pains that remain, though only half as bad in quantity compared to those of our ancestors, are twice as bad in quality.
And this is why any amount of little physical suffering, people embrace victimhood and they cry out, because this is what our culture is supposed to fix.
Twice as unendurable, without the meaning to surround them. The end result is that though the pains are less, we fear them and feel them more. It's like the difference between childbirth and abortion. To use a quantitative analogy for something that's not quantitative, the birth has 100 pains, but 1,000 transcendently meaningful joys. The abortion has only a dozen pains, but no joys. Suppose we took back our bad bargain, like Sidney Carton in A Tale of Two Cities, embracing Christ-like martyrdom for his beloved Lucy, wisely exchanging the whole of his material goods, his hitherto meaningless life, for the pain of the guillotine and the pleasure of spiritual good, moral meaning, including the hope for heaven. That was such an excellent bargain that Carton said of it, "It is a far, far better thing I do than ever I have done."
And again, this from a culture, that these are the riches that our culture has lost, but riches that were common in past cultures.
Or like Jim Elliot, the missionary martyr of Ecuador, who realized the same truth when he said to those who called him a fool for risking his life to preach to the savage Aucas, "He is no fool to give up what he cannot long keep for what he cannot ever lose." Both Sidney Carton and Jim Elliot were echoing the wisdom of the man who said, "What does it profit a man to gain the whole world and lose his own soul?" Did any human being in all of human history ever utter a single more practical sentence than that one? Yet, though spiritual pain is deeper than physical pain can be very deep and very troublesome. Its troublesomeness is not only physical, it dominates the spirit of everyone except those who are both the strongest and the sweetest of humanity. Pain is like a jealous tyrant with a whip, commanding all our attention at every moment, shouting, "Look at me, look at me." It's hard to meditate or calculate or compose music or poetry or discover great new scientific breakthroughs when you're being whipped or burned or cut all over your nervous system. Now, there are two obvious solutions to physical pain: no and yes. No tries to abolish it. And this is quite natural and good. And the modern West is very successful in doing that. Yes tries to somehow accept pain, but change our inner attitude towards it. And this is the answer of the ancient East, especially of Hinduism and Buddhism, and in the ancient West of Stoicism, which is a kind of non-mystical Buddhism. The modern West prays, "Grant me the courage to change what can be changed." The ancient East prays, "Grant me the serenity to accept what cannot be changed," and both pray for the wisdom to know the difference. But the modern West has not succeeded in conquering all pains by technology. Instead, it has created an artificial protective bubble that is empty of most of the physical pains of life that our pre-technological ancestors had to cope with, but we found the bubble also empty of meaning and thus spiritually painful.
The safe space.
We've abolished 90% of pain and also abolished 90% of heroism and courage, which are no longer needed in the bubble. Each decade we get a little closer to brave new world. That is, to the greatest pain of all, the pain of an absolutely meaningless life. To quote one of America's greatest philosophers, Yogi Berra, yes, we recognize wisdom even among the evil empire. If this world was perfect, it wouldn't be.
Basically what Peterson quotes Dostoevsky as saying.
Right on. Brave New World, by the way, if you haven't read it, you must read it. It's a prophecy. If the West's problem is failure, I think the East's problem is success. For some people, at least, that is, for the spiritual athletes who practice Raja Yoga or Jnana Yoga or the Buddhist Noble Eightfold Path, pain is abolished by abolishing its root, desire. When there are no desires left, there are no frustrations left. Hindu or Buddhist yoga can indeed succeed in killing off the desires. The true...
If an ideology is a crippled religion, what I see often people being attracted to New Age ideas, that's basically like an ideology because, I'm interested in Buddhism or Hinduism, but they're not interested in meditation or a serious discipline, because look at those religions. Do you want to spend 10 hours a day meditating? That's what it involves.
True Buddhist does overcome all pain, but also all pleasure, all fear, but also all hope, all hate, but also all love, all misery, but also all joy. This is a remarkable achievement, but is it worth the price of the abolition of half our human nature? It looks like spiritual euthanasia, killing the patient, the desires, to cure the disease, pain. I think, however, this is a misunderstanding. I must confess that the Buddhists that I have met have surprised me and impressed me with their peaceful alertness and spiritual aliveness. They certainly are not spiritually dead. But they have also surprised me with the inadequacy of their philosophy, their explanations. I must be as offensively honest with the East as I have been with the West, though, and protest that the freedom from pain is not worth the price. I will take the bitter with the sweet, thank you. The depth with the heights. Better to have loved and lost than never to have loved at all. From the moment of our birth, human nature includes two incompatible elements: the presence of pain and the demand for its absence. We all have pain and we all hate pain. Buddha's first noble truth and Freud's pleasure principle. What is pain? It is the disproportion between desire and satisfaction. In the words of England's richest philosopher, I can't get no satisfaction. And you can't always get what you want. The modern secular West tries to get the satisfaction. The ancient mystical East tries to get rid of the desires. The West tries to conquer pain. The East tries to conquer the fear of pain. Our common problem is that our desires are greater than our satisfactions. The West tries to change that disequation by bringing satisfactions up to the level of desires. Of course, this never works. while the East seeks the same end by the opposite means of bringing desires down to or even below the level of satisfaction. And this does work, but only for the practiced yogin or enlightened Buddhist. East and West both give us roads for escaping the problem. They're opposite roads, but they both escape the disproportion between desire and satisfaction, which is the formula for pain or suffering. What is the Christian alternative? C.S. Lewis says in The Problem of Pain, Christ came not to free us from our pains, but to transform them into his. That's the answer in one sentence. I'd like to try to unpack that answer.
And that's what he spends the time doing. So I'll leave a link to this. Well worth your time. One of my go-to things to listen to. And someone in the from one of my last video mentioned, my C.S. Lewis video mentioned Hitchens, and the thing, where was I going with Hitchens? I forget now. I left the comment there, but the thing. Oh yeah, I remember. In a sense, he says, well, Christianity with this vicarious atonement thing leaves Christians off the hook, and my point is that Christianity is actually not an ideology, because Christianity wants to say two things at once, and I'll get into that. That on one hand, Jesus does rescue us completely apart from ourselves, but what do we pay for that? We pay with our lives. But does the payment from our lives actually accomplish that salvation? No. This is Calvinism. So the Heidelberg Catechism, first question and answer, what is your only comfort in life and in death? Second question and answer, how can I experience this comfort? Because this comfort is not just something I want to know intellectually, I want to experience it. And the first thing you need to know is your misery. You need to understand and stop avoiding your misery. Now, I'm not telling you not to go see movies when you're having a bad day. I'm not a teetotaler. I think alcohol is fine within moderation if this isn't something you have a problem with. I am not saying that it's not good to take a break and have a vacation and all that. I'm not saying that, but you will never receive the comfort of not being your own unless and until you fully embrace the source of your problem, which is you. That you need to, why is it so bad to keep blaming everyone else? Well, number one, it's counterproductive because you can't do anything about everyone else. Number two, it's also blind because so many of our own problems are our own. And so we need to begin to stop and say, I am the fault of me. And I am going to own this. I am my worst enemies. Have other people hurt me? Yes. But where does the fault lie? It starts with me. G.K. Chesterton. Again, this is probably apocryphal, but what's the problem with the world? I am. So I need to acknowledge my misery. I need to own it. It's also, for example, there's so much wisdom in AA. Step one, I am powerless over alcohol, and I need a power higher than myself to rescue me. Step one. You need to know how you are delivered. Now, obviously, as Christians, we are delivered by the incarnation, the life, the work, the crucifixion, the resurrection, the ascension of Jesus Christ, and then the second coming, the Apostles' Creed. Gratitude then is the motivation for everything we do. Now, this is important because, and I appreciate Peterson's dual thing with his future authoring program. I need to, on one hand, look at the goal in front of me, and I also need to fear the hell I could become. So you need heaven and hell, and you need to live within that tension. And I think Peterson is right there. But the problem with this is a trap that Christians have long seen, that if I achieve it, I'll be self-righteous. And if I fail it, I'll be too self-blaming. You need to somehow get that balance right. And I think the way to do that is, I think the Heidelberg Catechism has that right, in that it's gratitude motivates us to move forward. Now, I've got dozens of my sermons online, and if you would listen to enough of them, you have my pity. But if you listen to enough of them, you'll notice that I almost always end every sermon in this way: misery, deliverance, gratitude. Misery, deliverance, gratitude. Because on one hand, I don't want my congregation to be legalistic and say, here are the rules and we have to obey them and therefore God will forgive me. No, that's not Christianity. That's karma. It's misery, deliverance, gratitude. And this then keeps the Christian work from being legalistic, because I don't finally earn my way to God. But yet, to address Hitchin's complaint, I'm filled with responsibility. The neighbor who is sleeping literally against my door, I cannot simply turn a blind eye. The story of Lazarus and the rich man continues to haunt me, but gratitude must be my motivation. Peterson, chapter 2. Most individuals are dealing with one or more serious health problems while going productively and uncomplainingly about their business. If anyone is fortunate enough to be in a rare period of grace and health personally, then he or she typically has at least one close family member in crisis. This is Scott Alexander's point. Yet people prevail and continue to do difficult and effortful tasks to hold themselves and their families together, society together. To me, this is miraculous. So much of that, so much so that a dumbfounded gratitude is the only appropriate response. So in a sense, what Peterson has in chapter 2 is 2/3 of the Heidelberg Catechism, just like he, in a sense, has half of creation, fall, redemption, restoration. He's got good chunks of the picture, but I think a full embrace of the gospel would complete it. People are so tortured by the limitations and constraint of being that I'm amazed they even act properly or look beyond themselves, but enough do so that we have central heat and running water and infinite computational power and electricity and enough for everyone to eat, and even the capacity to contemplate the fate of the broader society and nature and terrible nature itself. And I'm going to get a lot into nature when I get into C.S. Lewis's Miracles. And now not everybody has enough to eat, and so the world still does fall short. But Peterson's point here, I think, is dead on right. And I think we have, again, not an ideology and not a broken religion. You have to work both sides. And some people, in terms of my identity as a Calvinist, say, no, but aren't Calvinists reductionistic? Now, actually, Calvinists are inconsistent, because on one hand, they want to say that I am chosen and called by God completely apart from my works. And on the other side, I need to follow that narrow path. I mean, people say, yeah, but the Bible has both things. And I say, yeah, that's right. I'm a Calvinist. I try to believe what the Bible says. Well, it has both things. And I say, yeah, that's right. So Molinism is another way that they try to square the triangle. See, I think the problem is that if you lose the sense of that this is delivered to you, you become self-righteous. And if you lose the sense of, well, take up your cross and follow me, well, then you become lazy. So, and again, you can listen to my sermons on the solas to hear, how I work this out. So you need to work both sides. You need to focus on your deliverance. Anxiety leads to avoidance often. I think, again, Tim Keller's sermons do really good in terms of focusing on the gospel. And actually, I was listening to Philip Carey's Philosophy and Religion great courses series, and I think he really gets well the differentiation between Luther and Calvinism and where this gospel thing goes. And now, so Tim Keller is much more of the English Puritan tradition, and I'm more of the Dutch Calvinist tradition. And Tim Keller is so good partly because he takes some really good stuff from Luther, he takes some good stuff from the Puritan, but he also takes from the Dutch Calvinists. And so yeah, those would be a conversation I'd have with Tim Keller. But so you need to focus on your deliverance. You need to, again, this is the conclusion, it's the application of every Tim Keller sermon. You need to see your God saving you. If you're Jean Valjean, you need to see the Monseigneur. When the police take you to him because you've stolen the spoons, you need to see the Monseigneur say, and here are the candlesticks, Jean Valjean. You don't know the grace that I have given you. And once you see that grace, your heart will be changed and you will want to do good. That is the gospel. And so you need to see that, because if you don't see that, then it's just legalism. Then you're begrudgingly working for God instead of saying, Lord, you're beautiful and I want to give you what you have. Then when you see God and his beauty, you're not there hiding yourself because you're trying to compete with God. Then you're there submitting to him because what you really want to do is worship this God. So you need to work both sides. You need to see your deliverance, and then you need to practice gratitude. Joy as motivation helps you not beat yourself up for the inevitable disappointment, because again, we live in the age of decay, and all of the work you will do for the Lord will, in this age, seem to go to nowhere. The hours I have spent with alcoholics and drug abusers sitting in this chair talking to me about their misery. Sometimes I listen and I walk away and I think, Lord, have I done them any good? But what I'm working out of is the motivation of joy. And I know that many of my efforts will fail. Well, how can I keep doing these failing efforts that are still good? Because joy motivates me, because it's the vision of my beloved that draws me to do this. And what actually we begin to see in Matthew 25, and I have this so often that when I'm looking at someone who their life is a mess, I see exactly what Peterson noted in that chapter. I see on one hand, gosh, would I do as well as them if I was bipolar, alcoholic, living on the streets, eating out of a dumpster? I don't know. And so humanity is fallen royalty. This from Rudolf Steiner, rhythm replaces strength. And so, okay, so you're watching a YouTube and in the moment, and you have this in church, you hear a sermon and you're all inspired, but you know what? There's a cat video next, and there's a mortgage to pay, and there's a soul-crushing job to go to. How you cannot live in inspiration. You cannot live on this stuff. You are shaped more by your habits than your intentions. And Peterson, again, as a good psychologist, I'm going to keep my eye on the time. Oh, I'm almost out of time. Is a good psychologist, gets into this. You need habits. You need to go to bed. You need to get up. You need to eat breakfast. And AA always says it works if you work it, but many people it doesn't work for. And I get that. And this is the mystery of grace. Now you can't do it alone. You have to find other people to be accountable to. AA says you have to confess your shortcomings to another human being. That's fundamental. And the church has practiced this. It's in the Roman Catholic tradition. In the Protestant tradition, people unload themselves to their pastors all the time. You have to, and people do it willingly. Give them a chance and they'll say, I have botched my life and I need someone to rescue me. Is there possible anyone in all of existence that can rescue me? So my advice is use time against decay. You need a daily rhythm, and as Christians, that's often prayer or devotions. Other traditions like the Roman Catholic, doing the daily office. You need a weekly rhythm. Lily Bean, great saint of my church. You can meet her if you come to the Sunday school class or the worship service. You probably won't know who she is until you start listening. She has a great saying. She says, get up, dress up, show up. She's a diabetic who doesn't eat the donuts. She's a diabetic who goes to the gym. She's a diabetic who cares for her children who are 20, 30 years younger than she is, but she cares for them still, even if they drive her crazy. Get up, dress up, show up. And people are like, well, why go to church? Well, what are you going to do on Sunday morning? Watch TV? You're going to go eat a donut at Starbucks? Get up, dress up, show up, go to church. Get around some people who will get into number 3, get around some people who want the best for you. Get around some people and start building relationships with these people. Get around some people that you can be accountable to. Get around some people who are broken and fallen. You will have to practice loving your enemy, because sometimes these church people will make you crazy. And now it's all still grace, because you find lousy, graceless, evil church people who have said devotions all their lives. You find them every day. They've heard sermons all their lives, and you think they haven't heard a word of it. AA doesn't always work. and which the Bible says, seek the Lord while he may be found, call on him while he is near. And so cry out to Jesus. Well, I'm out of time. I got to close this off. Thanks for listening. That's chapter 2 in Peterson's book. Hope it was helpful.